Today I want to jump back into the study that we started just last week. It's a new study on the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, I'm really excited about this book. My only regret is that we started it on July 4th holiday weekend. And so here's what I know. I know the crowd today looks a whole lot better than the crowd was last week. And so here's the deal. If you missed last weekend's message, I'm asking you to do me a favor. I want you to either go back on our website or our church app, and I want you to listen to that message. I understand it was July 4th. People are traveling, enjoying the holiday season. It just happens, you know. But what happened last week in the message is, in many ways, we created a context for the entire study of the book of Ecclesiastes. And I'll say this about context. If you don't understand the context for the book of Ecclesiastes, it's one of the most depressing and probably one of the most confusing books in the entire Bible. But if you do understand the proper context, I do believe that it's one of the most helpful books in the entire Bible. So for your sake, for your own benefit, I want you to understand context, and I want you to be able to really benefit from this book study that we're going to be in for about 5 months together. So again, if you missed last week, just hop on the website or the app and get caught up. To get us started in the book of Ecclesiastes, I wanted to do a series called Chasing the Rabbit. Now, we'll throw the series graphic up on the side screen for you. What you see in this series graphic is that there is a greyhound dog, and that greyhound is chasing a rabbit because that's what greyhounds do. In fact, what I said last week is that greyhounds actually spend the best years of their lives chasing after the rabbit. So if you were to go to the track, if you were to watch those dogs, like they would load up into the gate and they would chase and they would spend literally what is the best years of their life chasing after this rabbit that runs around the track. Now, the problem, as I highlighted last week, is that what they're chasing is actually a mechanical rabbit. And so in a very real way, they're chasing after something that they're never going to catch. And that, my friends, is a completely exhausting way for human beings to live their lives. And yet, that's how so many of us are living. We feel like something is missing from our lives. We live in a culture that is always screaming at us, telling us that something is missing from our lives. And so we start the chase. We're chasing after what we hope will be the right thing. We're chasing more for something else. We're chasing after maybe the brand new thing. And so when you look at human beings, what you see is that we're always chasing. We're chasing after a better house. We're chasing after a better opportunity. We're chasing after a better girlfriend or a better boyfriend. We're chasing after a better education. We're chasing after a better job. We're chasing after a better adventure or experience. We're chasing after a better salary. And as a result, there are a lot of people who are living in the world who are on a run that they were never intended to be on. In some ways, it reminds me of a story that I read not that long ago. It's about a dog named Tattoo the Basset Hound. Now, I need to warn you, it's a sad story, especially if you're a dog lover like I am. But I also want you to know it's a true story. So I'll just share it with you, and then we'll see what we can learn from it. This is how the story goes. It says, Tattoo the Basset Hound went for an unplanned run when his owner shut one end of his leash in a car door and took off for a drive with Tattoo on the leash's other end, still outside. Motorcycle officer Kerry Filbert was on patrol when he noticed a car that seemed to have something dragging from it. Filbert chased and finally stopped the car, but not before the dog reached a speed of 20 to 25 miles an hour. Now, if you've ever seen a basset hound, that is moving for a basset hound, okay? 20 to 25 miles an hour. Unfortunately, he rolled over several times. Man said that the car's occupants, a man and a woman, jumped out when Filbert told them they were dragging a dog. The distressed couple began calling, "Tattoo, Tattoo," police said. Thankfully, the 8-month-old dog was not injured. Now, I would like to ask the dog if he was injured, okay? Like, I don't just want to take their word for it, because I'm betting that that dog had another version of the story, right? Like, it probably did not feel that great. And I imagine that dog, like, in that moment realizing, wow, like, I've got two choices. Like, I can either run down the road, or these people who claim to love me are going to be dragging me down the road. And that's not a fun experience. Now, I'll tell you what is comical, is imagining that basset hound running. Have you ever seen a basset hound run? Okay, I've actually got a picture, real picture of a basset hound running, okay? Now, we look at that picture, and I got to tell you, as I thought about the message this weekend, I thought, that's probably what a lot of us look like, right? We're on a run that we were never intended to be on. And it is an exhausting way for so many of us to be living our lives. Tattoo the Basset Hound went on a run that exhausted him, and it almost killed him. And some of you look at that picture and you think, yeah, that probably does paint a picture of my life. I am exhausted. I am tired. I feel like I'm on a run that I was never made to be on. And if that's the way you feel, then I want to ask you to really think long and hard today about a question. It's a question that my daughter shared with me not all that long ago, and I'm telling you, it was the kind of question that when she asked it, it stopped me in my tracks. Here it is. She asked me, Dad, in all you're doing, who are you becoming? In all you're doing, who are you becoming? Solomon is a man who said, I'm going to try it all and I'm going to do it all. And so he went on a run. And over the course of decades of his life, maybe the best years of his life, he was chasing after wisdom. He said, I chased after pleasure. I chased after women. I chased after wealth. He said, I chased after success. And here's what you need to know about the chase. If you're going to chase all of those rabbits, or if you're going to chase any of those rabbits, that will require a lot of doing on your part. And so the question I'm just asking you to think about today, this weekend, maybe even this whole next week, is in all of your doing, who are you becoming? Some of us are becoming tired. Some of us are becoming broke. Some of us are becoming absent. We're absent from the family. We're absent from our relationship with God. Some of us are becoming anxious or easily angered. Some of us are becoming stressed out and overwhelmed. Some of us are getting a little depressed. We're losing our joy. Some of us are probably becoming overly critical or maybe miserable to be around. Some of us are becoming physically unhealthy, and some of us are becoming spiritually unhealthy. And so let me tell you something about life today. If what you are doing is negatively affecting who you are becoming, then it's time for you to make a change. And that's really what Solomon's talking about in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 12 through 15. Solomon is still in the introductory section of his letter. He's not getting into any of the specifics, speaking generically about all these things that people do with their lives. And this is what he said. He said, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. He said, I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. Now, some scholars read that and they think, okay, here goes Solomon and he's chasing after wisdom. That is not what Solomon's doing. Solomon is still in the introductory section of the letter, and he's talking about wisdom. He's referring to studying something, but what is he referring to? What is he studying? What is he looking at with all the wisdom that he has? He's looking at all of the things that people do under the heavens. He says, what a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. Then he says it again. He said, I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. And he talks about all of these activities that people are involved in. And what does he say about them? He says, all of them are meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. Now, one of the things that I told you last week, I'll remind you again this week, is that Solomon is not writing this section or this book as a godly young man who is full of great wisdom. Instead, what Solomon's doing is he's writing this book as a much older man who had already spent the best years of his life saying, I want to live life and I don't want God to be a part of it. Now, as a young man, a very young man, Solomon grew up in a godly home. He grew up with a pretty godly father, a man known as King David. And yet he lived most of his life as a very young man, as a godly young man. He did it the right way. He said, I'm going to do it God's way. But then there was this season in his life when he said, you know what, I've tried it God's way. Now I think I want to try it another way. I've tried life with God, but I'm kind of curious. What would life be like without God? And he spent decades of his life chasing after everything this world had to offer. So let me just pause and ask you, you know anybody like that? You know anybody who kind of grew up in a godly family, grew up with some godly parents, grew up in church, did it God's way, got a little older, decided, you know what, I don't want to do it that way. I'm curious about another way. And so started trying to do life, not with God, but life without God, trying to figure out, you know, I want to know for myself, what is it that this world really has to offer? And out of curiosity, kind of walked away from God, walked away from church, the Bible sat on the shelf just collecting dust while they chased after, out of curiosity, everything this world had to offer. Maybe that's your story. Maybe there was a time in your life when you walked away from God for a season and you said, I just want to see what the world has to offer. And Solomon is writing about that kind of experience. And he's writing to say that I didn't just spend the best years of my life chasing after everything in this world. He's saying I wasted the best years of my life chasing after everything in this world. In verse 13, he said, I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. I'm not thinking about the God who lives above the heavens. I'm thinking about everything that happens under the heavens. In verse 14, he adds, I've seen all the things that are done under the sun. Again, that phrase, under the heavens and under the sun, is really Solomon's way of saying that I was looking at life to see what it could be like if God were not part of it. He uses this phrase dozens of times throughout the book. Early on in life, he tried life with God. But then he was curious about what life could be like without God. And what we said last week is that there are a lot of people who live their lives this way. Practically speaking, they live their lives as though there is no God. Maybe intellectually they have concluded that there is no God. But the question that we never got to last week is this: what do these people who live life completely detached from God, what do they do with their lives? If you're going to live life and you're going to focus exclusively on that which is under the sun or under the heavens, then what do you do with your life? What are your priorities? What do you live for? This was what Solomon was trying to figure out. And he's trying to determine, is there any value Or is there any meaning that could be found if you choose to do life that way? Now, I want to camp here for a minute because I think that people outside the Christian community and people inside the Christian community, we can busy our lives with all kinds of activities that are done under the heavens or under the sun, with really God not being a part of it. And we can stay so busy that either God gets weeded out of our lives or God is having to compete with all the activities in our lives. So I'm a guy, so I'm just going to talk to the guys for a minute. All the ladies can just sit back and kind of get a good laugh at our expense, but don't like elbow him too hard in the ribs, okay? Just take it easy. Just kind of laugh under your breath. Guys, I want you to think with me for a minute about all the activities that we engage in throughout the calendar year, okay? So every January starts basically the exact same way, okay? For us guys, we instinctively feel like there is something wrong with our lives, that there's something missing from my life, that there's something that I see in my life that I really don't like. And so what do? We set New Year's resolutions, right? And we go to work on a self-improvement project where at least for a couple of weeks until we get discouraged or we mess up or we cave, we're working on that self-improvement project for a period of time. And I think that we do it because we know that there's something missing and we're looking to figure out what is the missing piece from our lives. But a couple of weeks in, most of us have already failed, or we're realizing pretty quickly we're certainly not going to make it, another 50 weeks through the calendar year. And so we start to focus our attention somewhere else. And for most guys, the easy place to focus your attention in that time of the year is in this thing called the NFL playoffs, okay? They are ripping and roaring at that time of the year. You got the NFL playoffs going on, followed by the Super Bowl. And most of us are really excited about the Super Bowl. We're inviting our friends over. We're, throwing a big party. We're making lots of food, bringing in pizza and wings. And we watch the Super Bowl, not thinking that we're going to experience real adventure, but maybe kind of like vicariously living through other people who still have the physical abilities to do what we could do maybe when we were like 16 or 17 years old, right? After the Super Bowl is over, we immediately jump into a month-long celebration called Mardi Gras. That's exactly right. And let me just say this about Mardi Gras. If you are the kind of person who says, I don't want to think about anything beyond the sun, I'm only living life under the sun, then this is the greatest season of the year for you, because Mardi Gras is a license to sin. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. Like the whole essence of Mardi Gras is that you should feast on anything and everything that your flesh desires. Just go at it. We'll worry about the aftermath in about a month when Mardi Gras season is over, right after Fat Tuesday. And so we party for an entire month in this thing called Mardi Gras. And even in the middle of that month, we're already jumping into the next big thing. It's called March Madness, right? We're filling out our brackets, we're placing our bets, and while all of that's going on with March Madness, we're also planning or starting to enjoy our spring break adventure. As soon as spring break is over, we're moving into one of the most important weeks of the year. The Masters. It is springtime in Augusta, Georgia. It is the first major PGA event of the year. The azaleas are in bloom and all of the pros are rolling into what is called Amen Corner, okay? As soon as that week is over, we're jumping back from the pros, back into the college scene, where we're going to see how our favorite college team is doing in the big spring game, right? We've heard about the recruits in the off season, and now we're going to see, are the recruits as good as we think they are? Is the season going to be good, or is it going to be bad? And when the spring game is over, we are hoping to see that our favorite college baseball team is playing in, or in our case, winning the College World Series. That's right. And so when the College World Series is finally over, we're moving on to other things. What may be the most important holiday of the year. I'm not talking about Easter, because this is just life under the sun. So what we're talking about is Mother's Day. And it's important because if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, okay? And so if we're going to live life under the sun, we want to be happy. And so we're going to celebrate Mom. A little bit later, they're going to celebrate us on Father's Day. Now, right in between Mother's Day and Father's Day, there's some pretty exciting things that are happening. The speckled trout and the redfish, they're starting to run. And so now the chase is on. We're heading to our favorite fishing spots. We're running out to our favorite barrier islands for the weekend. We're planning or already enjoying our summer vacation. And what do you know? Snapper season is open. And I know it costs $500 to get out there, but I got to fill the freezer with the only 2 fish that they let me bring home. And so I'm chasing after a couple of red snapper. Got to be 16 inches or longer. And I'm going to bring those babies back and we're going to have a taco, okay? Because that's about all you get out of a couple of snapper. Everybody gets a taco, right? But we're chasing, right? And we're chasing and it's the middle of summer and life is really, really good on the coast in the summer, right? We have our favorite holidays. We have Memorial Day to kick it all off. We have Independence Day or July 4th where we can celebrate with friends, food, and fireworks. We end summer with this thing called Labor Day, and honestly, every weekend in between, as long as the weather is good, we're either running to Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, heading to the Barrier Islands, or maybe running over to New Orleans for the weekend. But just as summer is coming to an end, don't worry, the greatest season of the year is about to begin. We have fall in the air, and fall means football. That's right. We all say it together. That's correct. This is not a trick question. Football is underway, and there is a lot of it that you can enjoy. On Thursday night, we have the NFL game. On Friday night, we have Friday Night Lights. On Saturday morning, we have college game day with college football games all day on Saturday. All day on Sunday, we have NFL games. Monday night, we've got to get off work in time to catch the Monday night game. And all that leaves is Tuesday and Wednesday to set up my fantasy team for the next week. Because it doesn't really matter how old you are, we all love competition, and maybe competition is going to fill the void in my life. And in my opinion, that's not even the best part of fall. The best part of fall, in my opinion, is hunting season. And if you have not been up to the deer camp to get your deer camp ready for the fall, then you're already behind the 8 ball, because you should have put your food plots out, set your trail cameras up. You should have put corn in the feeder so that you are ready to get the big buck on the ground. Every weekend you run up to deer camp, you sit in a stand, you hope and pray that some big monster buck walks out. You remember that there's something else happening back at home, so you take a quick break from the hunting camp, rush back home so that you can attend Cruising the Coast, right? We go to Cruising the Coast, we're back up at the deer camp, back down at home because we got to take the kids trick-or-treating for Halloween, and then we're moving into the final 2 months of the year. Let me tell you something, they are busy months. It all starts with the Peter Anderson Festival. That's right. It's one of the largest events on the coast every single year. And so we have the Peter Anderson Festival, followed by Thanksgiving. As soon as Thanksgiving is over, we have Black Friday shopping, followed by Cyber Monday. That constitutes the busiest shopping season of the entire year. It runs all the way through Christmas. As soon as Christmas is over, we are rolling into the final week of the year, and we're planning our big New Year's Eve celebration somewhere at the casinos. And just in case you did not get your big buck on the ground, you can hunt the state of Mississippi, the rut, for the entire month of December, okay? And so as we wrap up the year, what we all do is we sit down on New Year's Day and we write some New Year's resolutions so that we can do it all over again. And that is life for so many of us. A very busy life focused primarily or exclusively on all of the activities that could be done under the heavens or under the sun. And so let me ask you a slightly different question than the first question. In all of that doing, what are you looking for? Have you ever even thought about it? Because Solomon says, like, I applied my mind to study. I devoted all of my wisdom to look at what are all the activities that are being done, just trying to figure out what is it that people are looking for. What are you hoping to experience? And have you ever found it? Because Bono sang a song one time where he confessed that he still hasn't found what he's looking for. And I think that's the way a lot of us are living our lives. This is the way Solomon lived his life, so much so in verse 13, he said, I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. He's saying, I gave real thought as to why all of us live our lives this way. Then in verse 14, he simply said, all of those things are meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. Now, notice, he doesn't say all of those things are sinful, because they're not. He just says all of those things are meaningless, which means that you're never going to find the meaning and the significance and the purpose that you're looking for and longing for if you focus exclusively or even primarily on life only under the sun. And the problem with all of these activities is they keep us so busy that one of two things ends up happening. All of these activities either replace God in our lives, or at a minimum, they compete with God in our lives. And because we're so busy, the place where we could find meaning and the place where we could find purpose, it gets completely and totally neglected. In fact, Dallas Willard has argued very convincingly that hurry and busyness are the great enemies of spiritual life in our day, which is his way of saying that all of these activities that just occupy and dominate our calendar, they are ultimately competing with or completely replacing God in our lives. We are so busy doing that we're not even thinking about who we are becoming. And the sad reality is that Solomon tells us who we're becoming if this is life for you. Verse 15, he said, what is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. Some scholars have suggested that this verse teaches us not just that everything in the world is crooked, but that everyone in the world becomes crooked when you do life this way. When you do life in a way that says, I don't really care about the God who lives beyond the sun. I'm just focused exclusively on everything that could be done under the sun. That becomes a corrupting experience for men and for women. And yet Solomon warns that it's not just corrupting or that it can make you crooked, but he adds that once it's crooked, it's hard to make it straight again. I think this is Solomon's way of saying that when I look back on the decades of my life that I spent trying to do life without God, that had a kind of permanent and lasting effect on the kind of man that I became. I became crooked. Is there grace? Yes. Is there forgiveness? Absolutely. But does life like that change a man or change a woman? You better believe it. It affects who we are. But it doesn't just affect us, it affects other people too. Solomon said, what is lacking cannot be counted. See, people who live their life like this, they are often MIA. They are missing in action, right? And so we think about people who are just so busy with all the activities that can be done under the sun. And you don't realize it. But what you're doing is every time you're saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to a whole lot of other things. Every time you say yes to someone, you're saying no to someone else. Anybody remember the song Cats in the Cradle? When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll get together then. And that one came back to bite him. Because when he wanted time with his son was living the exact same life that he had lived as a younger man. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. It may be that your family is the one you're saying no to. It may be your physical health that you're saying no to. It may be God that you're saying no to. This busy life, it ultimately affects your relationship with God. At the end of verse 13, Solomon said, "What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind." And I read that and I think, are you kidding me? You think, Solomon, that that's a burden that God laid on mankind? That's a burden that mankind created for himself. Because that is not the kind of burden that we see comes from God. In fact, Jesus talked about the burden that God has laid on mankind or that he wants to give us. Listen to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. He said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." God doesn't create a heavy burden. God is the one who gives rest to people who are carrying a heavy burden. What else did Jesus say? He said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and I'm humble in heart. You'll find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is," read it to me, "it's light." Sorry, Solomon. That's not a burden that came from God. That's a burden that you created for yourself when you said, "I'm going to do life without God for a season," because the burden that Jesus gives is not a heavy burden. It is a light burden. And so I just want to offer you exactly what Jesus offered you. Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Jesus said, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." Learn contentment from Jesus, because you will never learn contentment from anyone or anything in this world who is always screaming at you that something is missing and you need more if you're going to be happy. Learn contentment from Jesus. Learn self-control from Jesus. This is one of the fruits of the Spirit that he wants to produce in our lives. Learn priorities from Jesus. Learn rest from Jesus. Learn Sabbath from Jesus. A weekly rhythm every week of your life where you can worship, rest, and recover so that you can go into the new week being the best version that you can possibly be. Learn that from Jesus, because you will never learn any of those things from a world that is focused exclusively on life that is happening under the sun. These are the things that Jesus wants you to learn from him. These are the things that Jesus wants to grow in your life. The problem is these things don't grow in our lives because we're living the way of the world. And so Jesus talked about this in Matthew chapter 13, verse 22, just a couple of chapters later. He said this, he said, "The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word." So they hear all of the words of Jesus about contentment, about rest, about Sabbath, about priorities, about relationships over experiences, about self-control. They hear the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth, they choke the word out, making it unfruitful. So Jesus is saying that there are literally thorn bushes that are growing in our lives that are consuming all of the nutrients and all of the resources that we need so that better things, so that God things could actually be growing in our lives. And so that means for all of us that there are probably a lot of things that are going on in our lives that are good things, But because they're not the best things, they need to be eliminated from our lives. These are thorn bushes that need to be uprooted, and the garden needs to be weeded, and some things need to come to an end if we want a meaningful life instead of a meaningless life. Henry Cloud, in his book, Necessary Endings, said virtually the same thing. He said, endings are not only part of life, they are a requirement for living and thriving, both professionally and personally. Some of these activities may be good, but they are taking up resources that your best ones need. So you will always have to choose between what is good and what is best. And that's the choice that you got to make today. You're running, and it's an exhausting way for you to live your life. And you got to choose between a lot of things that are good and what is truly best. And I'll tell you what is best. What is best is living life with Jesus. Living life like Jesus, living life in the presence of Jesus. And so look at all of these activities that go on in our lives and answer the question, are they competing with God, or are they completely replacing God in your life? Solomon would say that if it's competing with God or completely replacing God, it's leading to a life that may be very busy, but it is completely meaningless. And so I want to pray, and then I'm going to ask the band to come out, and they're going to lead us in a song called Fade Away. And the song is a reminder that the whole world can fade away. And as long as you've got Jesus, you've got enough. After they sing the song, I'm going to come out and I'm going to give you 3 questions that I want you to think about in the week ahead. Let's pray together. God, we thank you so much for the way that your word speaks to our lives. I thank you for this book called Ecclesiastes. God, I pray for us as people that we would think long and hard about who we are becoming in the midst of all of our doing. God, that if who we are becoming is corrupted by all that we're doing, God, I pray that you would help us see it. But God, even more than that, I pray that you would give us the courage to actually change it. God, for those who don't know Jesus, I pray that this would be their day. I pray that right where they sit right now, they would stop doing life without you and they would start doing life with Jesus. That they would trust that Jesus came into the world to forgive their sins, but to also lead their life. To show them a completely different way of doing life than anything they would ever hear from the world. And I pray that they would literally become followers of Jesus Christ right here, right now. God, may you have your way. May we become consumed with Jesus rather than all the things in this world, and I ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.